Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly Podcast. I'm Tony Gerdeman, here as always with Tom Moore. Tom. How's it going?
Tony, I was worried you were going to keep me hanging so long that we weren't going to be able to get to the illegal fireworks store in time for all of this week's fun. Tony, what is your favorite kind of firework? It can, I mean, if you want to give me the one that goes at the fireworks show, that's fine. Ooh, if you want to give me hey, my cousin just got a crap load of stuff at bought it off a guy selling it out of his trunk in a highway rest stop. Like either one is fine.
Tom, I don't know if you know this about me, but I'm from the country. So
I did in fact know that, yes.
I've got some fireworks story, but I have some stories. Okay, I'm not going to give all of them to you, but growing up when I was like 5, 6, we lived in this neighborhood where in the corner of the neighborhood were some people, I don't know, can I still call people hillbillies? They were hillbillies.
Northwest Ohio, so no, you may not.
But the reason I love these people, and the reason why, is because they had fireworks year round. Didn't matter. Like normally you, Tom, you think of fireworks as like a late June, early July thing. No. These people, October, March, didn't matter, always had fireworks. And so, you know what? I think when I think of the 4th of July, I think I celebrate the entire year of fireworks. In terms of my favorites, one time I had my least favorite time, sparkler, because one time, I was same neighborhood, playing with a sparkler and it fell and went to pick it up and I picked up the wrong end. So I burned myself. So fortunately, my fingers grew back. I'm also like just little snap bangs because we were allowed to use those as kids, but the black snakes were fun. I was never a big, I didn't go and buy the illegal stuff because frankly, I was on my bike. And so I had to just settle for what was in the stores. But some other people would get some illegal stuff. And then it's like you're looking around the house. What can we blow up? What don't we need? And it's always like, well, we're staying at my friend's house. We'd be like, go get your sister's stuffed animals. And so that's where we would, do some stuff and things like that. So we had some fun. And, I would just, again, if you're out there buying fireworks and you have to sign a waiver saying that you're not going to use them in state, please do not lie about that.
It's a very serious offense, no question. Yes, I am at the age where my favorite fireworks are the ones that I can watch from within a 30-second walk of my car so that I can be home within 10 minutes of the end of the fireworks. It's like, do you want to go all the way downtown and set out a blanket and wait? No, I don't. Thank you for asking. I'd like to watch from the golf course 3 miles away, where then I can get in my car and be in my garage less than 10 minutes from the end of the grand finale. Thanks so much for asking. So yeah, it's, we all have our different views on these things. I prefer mine to be from a convenient distance from my vehicle.
Yeah, perfectly. We would go and watch them every year and then, fall asleep or whatever, because it's too late at night. And then eventually when you live in small towns, they can't afford to do it anymore. And so it's just like, you got to go to the next closest town, but that's what happens when you live in small town America.
Or they do it on a night that's not the 4th because it's less expensive, which is actually a really smart way to do it. And then, and then you can go to the big ones downtown on the 3rd, and then you can go to somewhere else on the 4th if you want to, and you can go to the ones, you got lots of choices. So
let me ask you this, Tom, before we stop talking about this. So I lived in Columbus.
Yes, go on.
I've lived in Columbus now over 30 years. I've been to Red, White, and Boom once, and that's one too many times. I can't do that crowd was crazy. And at one point there was a bunch of teenage ruffians that came running through the place. And it's just like, and this was, 25 years ago. Like, I don't need to do that. Fireworks. I can see fireworks on TV. I can see them out the window. I can hear them all night long. I don't need to see Red, White, and Boom ever again.
Yeah, I did Red, White, and Boom once when I was in college. I was like, wow, this seems like an awful lot of time to sit out on the hot, humid day and get eaten by bugs. So It was lovely, and I did it once. And then the way to do it, Tony, is to work for one of the local TV stations, and then they will have a shuttle that will take you right down there, and they will have air conditioned areas that you can sit in, and then you can watch the fireworks. And then you can be right back on the shuttle and be headed out of downtown mere minutes later. That's the way to do it. Surprisingly few people choose that, given, based on the total number of people downtown, surprisingly few have chosen to work for a TV station. So I did that once or twice as well. That's the way to do it. And, or if you know someone who works in one of those downtown office buildings, the Huntington building or the Rhodes office tower or whatever, those places will sometimes have parties those nights, and you can watch the fireworks from out those windows. Again, surprisingly few people take that route. I don't know why.
Last thing on this, and I'll probably cut all of this. But I used to work downtown, and we would get let out at 2 p.m. or whatever on these days that matched up with Red, White, and Boom. But there would be people setting out their lawn chairs at 7 a.m. and just getting their spot for this. And that's a long time to just be sitting out there. And again, this is July, but you want a good view over the river, and that's fine. But couldn't be me.
Couldn't be me. It could be me, Tony. Someone answering listener questions like this one, for example, from our buddy Propellerhead. Question from suburban Chicago: rank these players in order of likelihood to be a surprise superstar, not just a surprise impact, but a genuine star player. So the choices are CJ Hicks, Caden Curry, Jermaine Matthews, Arvell Reese, and Edric Houston.
I like this one. As I'm trying to do this in my head, I just immediately I have one answer, and then will I stick with that? But in the order for me, it's Jermaine Matthews.
Agreed.
Arvell Reese.
Okay.
Edric Houston. I'm going back on those two.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think Caden Curry, I think we know what he is. Mm-hmm. So I would put CJ Hicks in front of him because we don't know, which would make it a bigger surprise. So I guess my answer would be Jermaine Matthews, Arvell Reese, although he's more known than Edric Houston, which would make Edric Houston a bigger surprise. Not that it needs to be a bigger surprise, but Jermaine Matthews, Arvell Reese, Edric Houston. I'm going to go Curry Hicks.
Interesting. Okay. I was going to go Jermaine Matthews 1. I think that's, to me is the clearly biggest, biggest and best answer there. I think the personality, I think you've already sort of seen it on the field a little bit for the last couple of years. I think he's clearly number one to me. He's the one where you could see first team all Big Ten and, somewhere on the All-American team and, leaving after this year for the NFL draft. I think all of those are well within the possibilities there for him. Number 2, I was going to go Edric Houston, and I had Edric Houston and Arvell Reese very close together. And Arvell Reese might be one of those guys who just, puts up the numbers, but also becomes a star they're talking about this guy on every single broadcast because he really is a hard hitter. And you see him showing up in highlight reels and this guy just, turned that running back into a fine red mist. You could see him being that kind of way. I think Edric Houston might be more impactful and just, clogging up the middle and he's quick enough inside that I think he might be one of those guys that you always hear the color guy on the broadcast talking about, he shoots those gaps so quickly and he really is such an impact player there. I'm going to go Edric Houston ahead of Arvell Reese there, but I think those two are very close. CJ Hicks to me is fourth because I think there's something there where he just hasn't had the opportunity to do what I think he maybe has an opportunity to do this year where, as you said, I think Caden Curry, we've sort of seen enough of Caden Curry to kind of know what you got there. And I think you're going to have very solid edge player for Ohio State. But I think CJ Hicks, I think Caden Curry has a much better chance. There's a very good chance that Caden Curry is like a B+ player for Ohio State. But I think we're talking about who's more likely to be an A+. And I think there's a better chance that CJ Hicks really takes that big next step. And, so if you're asking who's more likely to be an above average player for Ohio State this year, I'd probably go Caden Curry. but I think CJ Hicks maybe has a little bit of a higher ceiling in terms of what he could be. One of those guys has 10 sacks this year. I think I'm more likely to think CJ Hicks somehow finds a way to do that, and more likely to have 5 sacks this year. It's probably Caden Curry.
Where would Kenyatta Jackson be on this list? Because in their careers, Caden Curry is more productive than Kenyatta Jackson. Caden Curry did not redshirt as a true freshman. Mm-hmm. Kenyatta Jackson did. Now Curry enrolled early and Jackson didn't. But when they've both been playing, Curry has been more productive, better stats at defensive end than Kenyatta Jackson. But, if you put Kenyatta Jackson on this list, is he 2? Is he 3? I mean, I think we give him a lot of benefit of the doubt because of some of the way that his teammates have talked about him, some of the departed teammates at the combine. But also I think there's just this expectation that he's going to be very good, but he's still very unproven. Mm-hmm. And the same thing with Edric Houston. I think there's all the potential there, but he had 7 tackles last year, to give you an idea. And so that's why his impact would be, frankly, Tom, it can't be a surprise because he's your starting 3 tech. That's one of those things. He needs to be 50 tackles and 12 tackles for loss and, 6 sacks. You need to be kind of Tyleik Williams, that sort of thing. So it'll be a surprise to people who don't follow the team as closely as the people who listen to this show or watch this show. But I'm fascinated. I think everybody's rooting for CJ Hicks. This is your senior year. You finally maybe have found your spot. I'm interested to see what it looks like. But when was the last time a senior who had not really done much and then as a senior has the career that everybody expected them to have as a freshman? Even go back to Steve Miller in 2014, who was a 5-star defensive end, never really did much, not a lot of stats, but ended up being a senior starter, and then had a touchdown against Alabama. It made some plays, but he never really kind of lived up to those expectations. And I wouldn't call him a star, a surprise impact. Maybe there's a surprise impact for sure, but of those 5, I think we're relatively in agreement because we're not far apart on Arvell Reese and Edric Houston. I can go, they need Edric Houston to be this guy, basically. And Hicks and Curry, like I said, we know what Curry. We assume we know what we've seen him. So we know what to expect from him. With CJ, you just don't know what to expect. And I think there's some excitement about that.
Yeah, for sure. And I do think we're very similar. I think we have stuff in tiers. I think you've got, your first tier is Jermaine Matthews and your second tier is Edric Houston and Arvell Reese. And then your third tier is CJ Hicks and Caden Curry. And I would probably have Kenyatta Jackson in that second tier where, the odds of one of those guys, Caden Curry, Kenyatta Jackson, CJ Hicks, the odds of one of them having 8 sacks this year, I'm going to say Kenyatta Jackson is number 1 for me on that list. But, the odds of one of the, if only one of those guys has 4 sacks this year, it might be Caden Curry because you just feel like you're going to get production out of Caden Curry. You're just not necessarily going to get, he just feels like the safer sort of middle of the road kind of pick to me, rather than the, potential big star national name kind of upside. So we'll see on that.
Let me run this one by you because in the 50 for 50 that I've been writing, I think one of my predictions was that basically no Ohio State defensive end maybe will have 8 sacks, but another prediction was that there'll be 3 of them that have at least, I think, 5 maybe. And the last time that was done was 2017 with Sam Hubbard and Tyquan Lewis and Nick Bosa, where I could see there's no, and I think it was, I have no first team All Big Ten defensive lineman from Ohio State this year. That was my prediction. But I can see this rotation leading to 3 guys with 4.5 or 5 sacks. I think that's, I don't know if it's likely, but I don't think it's unlikely.
Well, and there are 2 other names that we got to throw in here, 2 guys who transferred in, Logan George and Bo Atkinson. I think they play a big part in that as well, where you're not going to see what you saw a couple of years ago where Jack Sawyer and JT Tuimoloau were playing literally every snap of the game against Notre Dame. It's just, you're going to see so much more rotation, and you're going to see guys get it. I don't think you're going to see a lot of those guys getting 6 snaps a game. I think it's going to be a bunch of guys getting 15 to 25 snaps a game, which is where you do get into, everyone's getting 15 to 25 snaps a game, or 15 to 30, whatever it is. That's where you do get, 5 guys have 5 sacks each or something like that, where, it limits you, keeps you from having the Chase Young type of, 12, 14, whatever sack season. But it also means in the fourth quarter, when those offensive tackles are tired, you've got fresh legs going up against them, and you probably do see some of the benefit and some of the statistical gain there, where that's where your guys who are not necessarily starters end up picking up some sacks towards the end of the game when they're fresher than the guy across the line from them.
Yeah, and just for the note takers out there, 2017, Nick Bosa, 8.5 sacks. Sam Hubbard and Tyquan Lewis each had 7. So like 3 NFL defensive linemen, but they all wrote in. Jalen Holmes was the other guy in there, and they all played within like 6 snaps of each other that season, I believe.
Yep. So next one from @SPathfinder1, who are the must-gets for the 26 class? And, we on the last show talked about Luke Fahey, the quarterback, who was committing on the 3rd. I think he, that's one. If you'd like to hear our thoughts on Luke Fahey, go back and listen to the last show, but I think he's probably on that list where he's the last guy who's, really in that, the last like real likely short-term quarterback commit for Ohio State, where they really kind of need a quarterback this year, and he's someone they feel would be a good fit in the class. So I think he's definitely one of them. They've picked up a couple guys on that defensive line in the last week who I think maybe would have fit that mold as well. But overall, I think this is much more almost a position thing than an individual thing. And I think they're in decent shape at defensive tackle right now, but defensive end, you think you gotta find some guys there, and you maybe want to pick up another offensive tackle as well.
Yeah, and defensive end right now, like the last 2 guys not necessarily the last 2 guys on the board, but maybe the next 2 guys on the board, KJ Ford and Landon Barnes, both from Duncanville. Ohio State keeps missing on these defensive ends for various reasons, or maybe the same reason. And so it's hard to assume, certainly that won't come into play this time, where all of the things, will match up, whether it's, position fit, playing time, NIL fit, advancements and things like that, where it's like, well, it hasn't been working out, but I'm sure it'll work out with one of these 2. And I know from watching, we've seen Curry Wilder step up, and that's been step up in camps and in combines. So like, it's not quite the same as football, but he's been impressing somebody. So if you could add somebody to him, that would be big. Tyler Atkinson, the linebacker, 5-star, who, again, this is a national battle, and there are some that think he could end up as an edge rusher, so maybe he fits into that and whatever. But it's to classify one of these, top 10 players as like Felix Ojo or Atkinson as a must get. It's like, no, those would be love to have. Those would be very nice gets. But you're talking, like you said, quarterback, talking some kind of a defensive end that is of Ohio State caliber, and not somebody that's just going to occupy a spot for a while. I think they feel good enough about their 2.5 corners with Jacob Weatherspoon being a nickel, and I think Braylon Womack at safety, if they could close with him, that would be great. They've got some very good safeties right now, but if you could get that guy who has positional versatility to play kind of all over the place, then that would maybe go a long way. So I'll say this, because they've got one running back committed. They're still waiting on Derek Cooper, who has pushed his commitment back. Like, I don't think that that's going to happen for Ohio State. They signed 3 running backs in 2025. If they end up with just one in 2026, I think they're okay with that. Again, there's no receiver that is a must get that is still out there right now. Jaquaden Guilford pushed his commitment back. Keenan Bailey has got his tight end committed. His room is full. Felix Ojo, they've already got, Sam Greer has been lighting it up this past week as well. So I don't know that a tackle per se is a must get, but I think quarterback, defensive end, and Braylon Womack would probably be the top of the list for me.
Yeah, that would be if they end up with a couple defensive ends, 1 to 2 more defensive ends in this class, and you get Luke Fahey and you get Braylon Womack. That's a pretty darn good class. That's probably not number 1 in the nation, but that's a pretty darn good class where you've kind of filled some of the holes that you needed to fill. You've got some depth on the offensive line. You've got some high level talent on the offensive line. You've got some depth. You'd have a second straight pretty deep defensive line class, which they really have needed to restock that room, and that would kind of answer that need. So, we're not having is this the greatest class in Ohio State history conversation, which we sometimes have and sometimes don't. And this is a year where you're not, but if you're, well, boy, everyone's a little nervous about this year's class, and you've got the transitional stuff going on with the house settlement being in, but not entirely. And how is that going to hold up in terms of, potential lawsuits and all that kind of stuff and all the uncertainty around that. If this is the step back class that has everyone freaking out, that's, that is a pretty good outcome there. If you've sort of filled all your holes and, you have a top 5 again, nationally class, that's not too bad, especially when one of the schools that's ahead of you is USC, where it's like, I would like to see how this all fits together, 6 to 18 to 24 months from now. I am very curious how all the interpersonal dynamics and roster dynamics and locker room dynamics all sort of work out with the way that's been approached, because that has not necessarily worked for teams that have tried that approach in the past. And I don't know that it's necessarily going to work in this case as well. So, you may have the, air quotes 4th or 5th ranked class, but end up being, when all is said and done, end up with a better result than some of the school classes ahead of you, because you're kind of doing things in the way you have traditionally done them. And even if that does create some short term, you miss a guy here, you miss a guy there, because you're sort of being a little more patient with things. I don't think that's a bad result.
Well, and I like the way you've put it before with USC. It's you either pay the recruits or you pay the buyout for the head coach, Lincoln Riley. And so what would you rather do? Like, well, let's just go land the players. It's a cheaper path forward for right now. And then, I see Ohio State fans, and they're upset about Michigan just going out there and, quote unquote, just buying players right now. Currently, Ohio State has the number 5 class. Michigan has the number 8 class. Michigan has 18 commits. Ohio State has 19. It's still early to start, poking it at the recruiting classes. Because I know every year from like April to like September, you have Notre Dame fans in our chats and our shows like, aha, Notre Dame's up, Notre Dame's got the number 1 class, number 2 class or whatever. And it's like, they kind of go quiet in December. But, and the last thing, we've been talking about this on the message board, Buckeye Huddle message board presented by Jeff Ruby's Columbus, about Ohio State, not being as playful with the money to recruits as other programs are right now, as everybody is just kind of in this land of limbo waiting for, I don't know, rules to be enforced. But what did it do for Texas A&M to go and buy a class? What's been the positive that has come? What's the one positive? Like, give me some of the positives that have come out of that, because you lost your head coach, you lost a bunch of players, you've had to reshuffle, you've had to rebuild. And I guess you could look at this class by class. When is somebody going out and just buying a class? And maybe that's a loose terminology. I don't know if Miami did it in the following year, but like, what do they have to show for at this point? So I think there's some of that, but also I understand the frustration from Ohio State fans where like, it just seems like everybody's passing you by. But if you look, it's like, you look at your speedometer, you're still doing 85 in the middle lane. It's like, you're still moving at a pretty good clip. And just maybe everybody will slow down once they hit the speed trap. I don't know. Like when the NIL speed trap comes in there. But I also don't understand, Tom, maybe you can explain this. Because this is something I'm still confused about. If you're paying high school recruits, those players are not part of the NIL Go aspect of the college football thing. So how does that work in there? Where does that not need to be reported? I'm still trying to figure all of this out.
Right. And I think schools are trying to figure that out to a certain degree too, which is why you see schools having maybe some different approaches right now, where if you're USC, and boy, we sure do have a lot of money invested in Lincoln Riley, and it sure would be great if Lincoln Riley won a football game more consequential than the Holiday Bowl at some point. And so you're going to try and do what you can to put him in position to succeed. So we don't know exactly what Lincoln Riley's buyout is, because USC is a private school, not subject to FOIA. I have heard numbers ranging between 60 and $80 million on that. And I don't know that anyone knows for sure, but I think that's sort of some back of the envelope math. And boy, if you can spend $40 million on a recruiting class right now, and that might be better than spending $80 million on buying your coach out, especially if you can keep those guys. But as you said, you look at the schools that have kind of tried to do this. You look at Texas A&M, and I can do this off the top of my head because we've had posts about this on the message board. They have a Las Vegas Bowl participation ribbon to show for it, and a Texas Bowl participation ribbon to show for it. I know Miami went to the Pop-Tarts Bowl and the Pinstripe Bowl. They don't think they won either of those. You can go back to Ole Miss. Ole Miss did this, 10 years or so back. And yeah, they won the Peach Bowl, and that was very exciting. Did they win the Cotton Bowl? They might have won a Cotton Bowl as well. That was very exciting. They had a couple guys go in the first round of the NFL draft. That was very exciting. That's it. And they, it's fine.
Did they keep those? Did they keep those bowl wins? I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know if they kept their bowl wins. I know they didn't keep their coach. So, and that was sort of related to the NCAA stuff. But, I think the speeding on the highway analogy is a good one, because you're going 85 and there's people going faster than you in the left lane. And are they going to get pulled over? I don't know. But, if I'm in the middle lane and I'm getting passed, I'm probably not going to be the one who gets pulled over. And if I come over the crest of a hill and there's a cop sitting in the median, I'm not the one who's having his heart jump into his throat. And maybe the guy in the left lane gets pulled over and maybe he doesn't. But, that I don't know that that's a risk that's worth taking, because what's the worst case scenario here? Ohio State loses out on some defensive line recruits this year. And, and then a year from now, we know that this is what the reality of the situation is, and this is how this is going to be enforced. And then you move forward. And what is the big, terrible negative outcome here? That you have a year where you don't win the national championship. Ohio State's had lots of years when they didn't win the national championship. Ohio State's not going to go 7-5 suddenly because they had, they missed on 2 defensive ends in one class. They're going to be at least a college football playoff contender every single year, because they have, you go back 30 years and Ohio State would have been in the college football playoff, at least contention, in virtually every single year outside of 2011 and 2004, basically going back to 2002. So you go back 20 something years and you're in the playoff virtually every year. You're going to win, if you win 3 of them, great, but that's over a 20-year span. You're not going to win the national championship every year. You're going to have years where you get knocked out in the first round of the playoff. It's going to happen. And, but this is not a program that is in imminent danger of having the floor fall out from under it. And suddenly, and now you're in the Pinstripe Bowl with Miami, and oh boy, look, they spent all the money and they got all the way up here and you didn't spend all the money. And now you're all the way down here and you're in the same spot. And that's just not how it's going to be. It's just, this is Ohio State taking a little bit of a more patient approach here. And I know that there are people within the building who are, maybe a little less patient than others, but it'll get worked out. Ohio State is a program that has not had an extended period of down for 40 years. I mean, really basically since the transition from, you want to argue about the Cooper to Tressel transition. That was 3 years between a number 2 in the country and number 1 in the country. So if that's your definition of down, then okay, that 3-year span between number 2 and number 1. Before that, you're looking at like the late 80s, early 90s. And that is, believe it or not, 35 years ago at this point. So this is not a program that is about to fall off the edge of the earth. It's okay. Take a deep breath. It will be fine. They will be patient. They will figure out what they want to, the appropriate way to handle it moving forward, and then they'll do it, and it will be fun.
And I understand the frustration where you feel like we would have had these guys if not for this, not for this thing that everybody else is doing, but Ohio State refuses to do. I understand that frustration. I also expect it to be fixed relatively soon and addressed. So it's like, yeah, you're losing something right now, perhaps. But again, as we said in past shows, there's every chance that the guys they're losing out right now are, guys like Keon Keeley and Zach Rice, who were 5-star guys that Ohio State was in on, but didn't land at the end of, you know, didn't ultimately land. But then also those guys have not really done anything in the college game to this point, with a couple of years of having an opportunity to do so. But yes, again, I understand the frustration, but I think Ohio State will be okay. I think they're going to be all right. It also doesn't help things when you see Michigan going and landing some guys. But as I said a few minutes ago, like, Ohio State still has a higher ranked class than Michigan right now. So I don't think all things are lost at this point.
No, and I want to sort of make sure we're saying, providing the whole picture here. I don't, no one is saying that Ohio State is not going to be spending the money, not going to be providing NIL to players, all that kind of stuff. They're going to do what they're going to do. The approach for several years has been, you're not writing enormous checks to guys who are still in high school. You're not writing, you're not handing out enormous sums of money to guys who are, very good high school players, but are not going to be immediate impact players at the college level. It's much more reward the guys who have been there and who have proven it at the college level. That's been the approach for Ohio State for a number of years. It has worked out just fine. Will that be a viable approach moving forward? They're figuring that out right now. Everyone is sort of figuring that out right now. We have not seen the first round of, $4 to $5 million true freshmen, or $2 to $3 million true freshmen walking into, programs where the veterans are making a quarter of that. What kind of impact is that going to have in the locker room? We don't know. You've seen sort of bits and pieces, and, the plural of anecdote is not data, but, in the Miamis and the Texas A&Ms and the programs that have done that, it hasn't really worked out all that well. Will it work out for USC? I don't know. We will all find out together, but it's not, that USC hasn't hung a banner yet. They're just, they're recruiting well, and it is early July, and signing day is still 5 months away. So, there's a long way to go. My advice to you would be to go ahead and pop on a copy of some of those college football playoff games, enjoy those, take a deep breath, and, we'll see what's happening in, we'll see what's happening in December. You can't judge a recruiting class on signing day, no matter how hard everyone tries. You certainly cannot judge a recruiting class 5 months out from signing day. So I would advise climbing down from the roof. It is pretty hot up there because of the sun and whatnot. So climb down from the roof, take a deep breath, and watch some of those games from the end of last season and enjoy those. And, we'll see where things are in December.
Last thing for me in today is, I would like somebody to do a study in about, 10 years, to see if the success of the NFL draft, like the hit rate, has declined because college players are now more than ever choosing a place based on how much they're being paid, rather than fit, development, things like that. And I'm not saying Ohio State would be the best place for everybody. I'm saying, like, when you change your priorities, does it change your production? Does it change your development? And I think that's going to be something I'm not going to spend time on, because that's all, that's a lot of minutia, and what are we saying is a success and what is not. But I'll be interested to talk to NFL people down the road if they have seen a change, and maybe the difficulty, or there's just not as many as there used to be, or this or that, because they're always going to complain about something. So I'm interested to see if that will be something they complain about. Tom, anything else before we go?
Nope, we are good. But as Tony said, we've had a lively conversation about the NIL piece and recruiting and all that kind of stuff at BuckeyeHuddle.com. We enjoy chatting about all of that with you guys there as well. And if you want to sign up, this would be a great time to do it, because we are headed into July, and boy, we're like, what, 2-3 weeks away from being in Las Vegas. I don't know how that's possible, but the off season's already almost over somehow.
Yes, Tom. Magazine season came and went, and now it's Big Ten media season. But thank you all for tuning in. Hit that thumbs up if you could, if you're watching us on YouTube, and subscribe to the channel and hit the bell to be notified if you've not yet done so. And of course, as Tom said, always find us at BuckeyeHuddle.com. Thank you all for tuning in, and we'll talk to you all later.